Hello, welcome to A Bit Beyond the Basics of Immigration. Preferences, wait lists, and backlogs waiting on the immigration system. Today's topic is going to cover a variety of different pieces of the immigration law, but they all have to do with waiting and waiting and waiting. In most cases, people who are eligible for an immigration visa but are waiting to get it for some reason. This first portion is about the preference categories. And to be quite frank, I'm going to explain it the best I can. I don't understand it 100%. It's not my expertise. I'm going to tell you the shortcut that I and many people use at the end, but I want to try to explain it a little bit at the beginning. If you haven't watched it already, I recommend you go back and watch the first part of immigrant visas, the family-based visas where we talked about preferences for different family members. I'm going to quickly recap it here. Talks about it a little bit more there. These pieces really go together. All right, so here goes. We have a United States citizen. And later on, we have an LPR. And to get a family-based visa, this US citizen can petition for certain kinds of family members. Not everybody, but certain kinds of family members. Okay, here are categories of family members that you can petition for. A US citizen can petition for their spouse, their child who's under 21 and unmarried, or their parent. They can petition for older or married sons and daughters. They can petition for their brothers and sisters. An LPR can petition for their spouse or minor child, and they can petition for other sons and daughters with other criteria. Okay, this is who they can petition for. Now we get into the fun part. Who gets priority to come? Not all of them get to come every year. So this is where it gets a little wild and crazy. Congress looked at this way back in the 1950s when they set up our immigration system the way it is today. And they said, we don't want everybody who's everybody's family member coming into the United States. We want to limit how many people come total into the United States, how many people come based on a family relationship, and in order to, and how many people come from certain countries. So we haven't even started talking about countries yet. Let me go ahead and write that up. We're going to make limits. Okay, so first of all, Congress said, all right, the spouse, minor child, or a parent of a United States citizen, they get to come, they're the first of the line. They always come to the first of the line. They're what we call immediate relatives because they get to get a visa immediately. If the petition is approved, immediate is a loose term in immigration world in the 21st century, but they get to the front of the line at least. So once the petition is approved, these people can go get their visa or they can adjust their status and become an LPR, things that we've talked about a lot in the other videos. They can do that right away, immediate. So these ones right here, they get their visa immediately. The rest of these categories, they are put in an order. And Congress said, we want no more than 30% to be for this, and no more than 20% to be for that, and no more than 17.6% to be for another category. So each of these has categories with a percentage limitation of the percentage of total visas that we hand out for the year. Total visas handed out, they get a percentage of that. But then there's a finite number. Here's a number of visas. If we give out so many of these visas, because they're immediate, no percentages on them, they get one, that they end up taking 50% of those visas, then these have to be allocated accordingly because we only can give 50% of the total to these people. If this category takes up 10%, then you can see that each of these categories, because they are a percentage, they're going to get more number of visas for each of these categories that particular year. So it's constantly changing how many of these visas we give out. Add on to that there are restrictions by country. Congress said you can't give more than X number per country. So if with all of this balancing over here, if Mexico has already reached their allotment per that each country gets, then the people from Mexico, even though they would be at a certain place in line, they have to wait while other people from other lines get to come up more quickly because their country hasn't met their country limit. You can see how this gets really complicated. So if someone is a family member trying to get a family visa, they are waiting in line. The reality is that today, everything has lines, because this was made a long time ago. Everything has lines except for the immediate relatives. And even the immediate relatives have to wait, which we'll talk about later, but that's not a preference category. Let me try to draw this quickly. So here's the US, and here are people waiting in line. So we have the first line here. They get to go first. People waiting in line here. All right, these are the people waiting in the line to come in. So these ones get to come first. Welcome, 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 welcome. Okay, now that we've given you your visas, now we can take some from here, and we can take one from here, and we can take one from here, and we can take one from here, and we can take two from here, and we can take one from here, and maybe even a couple more from here. Meanwhile, guess what happens? Some more people come here. These ones move up to the front of the line, and some more people come. And so then it's like, actually, wait, hold on. You don't get to get any more because we have more of these we need to take. They get to come right away. So meanwhile, these lines aren't staying static. They are backing up because they aren't getting to go in very quickly. And so the same thing with all of these, as they don't get to go in. So maybe initially there weren't a whole lot in this category, but as they don't get to go very much, then their line gets longer and longer and longer. And again, like I said, this is just with the preferences. It's without taking into account the countries. So maybe over here, this person is from India. So actually, you know what? You don't get to go. This person gets to come in front of you, and this person gets to come in front of you, and you get to step aside over here because you're from one of the countries where we have so many people that we've met our country number already. Currently, the countries that are in their own lines waiting, so they really are like kind of step over to a separate line, are Mexico, India, China, and the Philippines. If you look at those, there are a couple things they have in common. One is, well, Mexico, of course, is right beside the United States, so has a high rate of immigration. China, India, and the Philippines have huge populations, but they get the same number of visa. It's per country. So India, China, the Philippines, they get the same number of visas, and Mexico, all big countries actually, the same number of visas as, say, Switzerland or Benin or some other country that's much smaller population, much less demand to come to the United States. They still get the same number of visas. So their lines are backing up really far back. I'm going to tell you about the quick way to find out where you are in line. There is something called the Visa Bulletin. You can actually Google Visa Bulletin. And if you look there, you see what the different preferences are, and you see the country line. And what happens is if someone has their petition approved, or when their petition was filed, actually. So my petition was filed in May 12th, 1996. Then I can look and see, I'm from China, and I filed in May 12th, 1996. And right now they are accepting visas for China in my category from June 1995. So not my turn in line yet. They're going to right here in the line. Let me move over here. They're going to this point in the line, and I'm still back here a little bit. But I keep watching because it's getting close. So one of these months, it changes every month. One of these months, they're going to say, we're accepting visas in July 1996. Yes, I am this part of the line that came before July of 1996. I was back in May of 1996. So now I can go and I can go get my visa. If you are totally confused by all of that, don't worry about it. Watch it again. Maybe it'll make more sense. Maybe not. Just know Visa Bulletin tells people how they can look it up. But the important thing to know for this series, for the basics of immigration, or a bit beyond the basics, is that there are all these different statistical things that are making it so people have to wait to get in, even when they're eligible for a visa. And for brothers and sisters particularly, this is usually decades-long wait, a long, long time. Some of the others can be long. Some of them don't make sense. Sometimes just because of who gets in line, people who should have less preference actually get to come faster than other people just because of the way their lines are moving. That's the preference category. That is one reason people wait a lot for immigration benefits that they're actually eligible for. Preferences. I'm going to erase some of this, and then we're going to talk about a couple of other things. Before I leave the preferences arena, I should mention something important. Both family-based and employment-based visas have preference categories. And if you look on the Visa Bulletin, you'll see those. Historically, family, for longer than I've been alive, the family-based categories have had lines. And so people have to figure out which preference category they're in and then watch to see when they will be able to come into the United States. Employment-based visas have preferences, But usually there wasn't a line for them. So even if you're in a lower preference, you usually would still be able to get your visa fairly quickly. We are getting some serious backup in a couple of the preferences in employment, but the last few years, there's been a huge backup. And so now people are waiting a long time for their employment-based visas as well. So that does apply both in family-based and employment-based. All right, those are preferences. I keep thinking about something, so I went ahead and recorded it after the fact, and I'm inserting it here. Recently, I went to the DMV, and my DMV had a system that's very similar to the preference categories. You go in and you get screened, and then they put you in a letter category. I could not understand what the letter categories were. There were a couple I picked up on. D was people getting a driver's license, but there was A, and there was D, and C, and F, and H, and I, and a variety of different letters. And then there was your number, and your number was just whichever number came next. That made sense. But when they called people to the counter, they didn't just call in the number you walked in. This wasn't like take a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you were the next number. It had to be a letter and a number. So D7, come to counter 9. F43, come to counter 11. So you had to know what your letter was and your number. And until they called someone with your letter, you didn't even know where they were in your number system. I had like a 43 or 29 or something, and they called a 7. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be here all day. And then I realized the letter part at the beginning was a different category. It still was 11 numbers before mine. So, but at least when they would call out my letter, which I think was H, I could see what number we were at in my category. And certain counters handled my category and other counters didn't. And what happened with that is that meant that people who got there after me also got to go sooner. It's really frustrating when people who've come in after you did get to go before you. But it is the way their system works. It makes sense to them. And the reality is that's exactly how the preference category works. People who have been waiting in line over here, they've been waiting in line since before this person over here was even born. And this person just gets to walk up to the counter and get their driver's license. And this person is still waiting in their home country to get a visa. I just thought I'd share that as a non-immigration example of how this really happens. And I don't like it. And it doesn't always seem very fair, even though the system using it has a good reason for why they are doing what they're doing.